I'm Jenny Brackman, the Vice President of the Forward Facing Institute, and I'm excited to come to you today to share with you something that we call Tools for Hope. And this is Tools for Hope, depending on what language you like, it could be the Tools for Hope Reader's Digest version, it could be Tools for Hope for Dummies, it could be Tools for Hope for the rest of us. Either way, if you want to know the really, really deep science of the autonomic nervous system, then you can watch, in addition, the other Tools for Hope that Eric Gentry does. But this one is one that's full of metaphors and illustrations that I've come up with that have helped both my children and myself and others that I've trained really know how to quickly and immediately understand and apply these important tools. So that's why we're here today. So cause and effects of stress. When I teach, especially when I teach teachers or any group of professionals or parents really, we first start going and make a list on a whiteboard of what their causes of stress are. And usually I get all sorts of examples. We go through traffic and bills and employers, children, spouses, all these sorts of effects of stress, causes of stress. And then we go into talk about the effects of stress. And with those effects of stress, we have mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual effects. We don't need to dig very hard to make a list of what those effects of stress are. And so as you're watching here at home, I'd invite you to either pause and write down or just pause and think about if you were going to make the list of your cause of stress and then the effects on you, what would they be? So I invite you to pause for a few minutes and think about that. So then when we're in a large group, what I do is, by intentionally being a little bit provocative, is I'll draw a giant line through my whiteboard and X out the cause of stress. And I say, what if these were not the cause of your stress? And immediately people start feeling a little bit irritated and a little anger, which I really welcome, because people eventually think like, well, what are you saying? What's wrong with me if that's not the cause of my stress? But then I ask people to think, what does it mean about your future if this is the cause of your stress? All these things that you've named. Because how many of these causes are your stress, are you able to change? And that's when I hear, none. So what does it mean about your life, your hope, your future, if you can't change the cause of your stress? And that's when we get to a different feeling in the group with like, wow, I will be a victim for the rest of my life, a victim to my circumstances. And that's how we get people's attention. That's how we get people's engaged and attentive. Because what if we could tell you that these things that you thought were the causes of your stress are not the cause, but rather that it is your painful past learning that's intruding into your perceptual system that's causing you to perceive threat where there's little or no danger. And so these causes are simply the meaning that we have created about these perceived threats. And so we invite people into a process that's really a paradigm shift so that they can learn that they can have a changed quality of life regardless if these causes don't change. So to show you how to do that, I'm going to share a process with you that we call Tools for Hope. And in Tools for Hope, I'm going to give you, for about the first 15 minutes, a owner's guide, if that makes sense, for your autonomic nervous system so that you can understand how this nervous system that you have creates a threat response and then what you can do about it. And then we'll talk about the specific tools for hope that we will teach you that show you how you can now interrupt that threat response. So in the training, when we're working with people, we talk also a few minutes about the difference between self-regulation and relaxation. And that's really where forward-facing differs from other great, wonderful relaxation techniques. And so especially when I'm with a group of teachers, I like to say, okay, so what are the things that you do to relax? And I'll hear things like get a massage, do yoga, listen to music, go running, watch Netflix, eat chocolate. And we get a pretty healthy variety of relaxation techniques, some of them beneficial and others just self-indulgent. And then I ask them, how many of these relaxation techniques can you do when you have a class full of kids and maybe a couple of them super dysregulated, or you have a kid in your face? And they say none. And then I say, how many of you are successful at being able to take care of yourself during that long 6 hours, 7 hours when you are unable to relax? So we'd like to teach that relaxation, although important, is wonderful, is something that we do when we step away from our activities of daily living, from the demands that are on us. Whereas self-regulation is something that we do within the context of our activities of daily living. So self-regulation is a process that is typically a 2 to 3 second intervention you can do with your body that allows you to return to comfort and then re-engage. And so that is what will give us lasting power. That's what gives us the ability to be in challenging or even toxic environments and not get sick from them. So we like to ask people the question, are you 100% safe right now? Very, very rarely do I get someone who says yes to that answer. And when we ask people, what's the danger? And they say, well, someone could come through this door, or this virus could be floating through the air and coming into my lungs. And what we invite people to explore is what the meaning of right now. That the meaning of right now is that the only place that I can experience safety is right now. Not 5 minutes from now, not an hour from now, not 3 seconds right now. But if I'm safe right now, then I don't need my threat response, which is what we're going to learn about in just a second. I don't need a threat response right now to take care of me. And especially when I'm dealing with or interacting with parents who have special needs kids, they'll say, well, my child has this really serious disease and I have to be vigilant. I can't relax. And I like to say, well, what would it be? What would it be for your own well-being if you could maintain or you could find a relaxed vigilance where you could be watchful but not afraid? And that's what we invite people to do, is that there's a chance that we are aware. It's not covering our eyes and saying all good, happy, but it is being aware of what's going on in our current environment, and that our current environment right this very moment is one that's safe. So now I'm going to take a few minutes and help explain why so many of us have these nervous systems that are causing us to think, and that's not actually even a thought, that our nervous systems are causing us to perceive a dangerous world. So I'm going to go through a couple different ways we can understand our brain. And so we have our upstairs and our downstairs brain is one way to think about it. So our upstairs brain is our parasympathetic nervous system. Our upstairs brain is what we use when we're calm and relaxed. It allows us to think critically, and it really helps to create the feeling of safety. Our downstairs brain is also known as our sympathetic nervous system. I was taught many years ago the way to remember that is it feels sorry for us when it perceives that we're in danger. When we're sympathetically engaged, fear dominates. We are prepared for fight or flight. Our bodies are ready for action, and rational thought remains very difficult. So it's important to know that our sympathetic is not a bad system. It's not less important than our parasympathetic system. They are designed to work together, and we desperately need both of them to stay alive. What we don't want, and what most of us have, is sympathetic dominance, where our sympathetic nervous system is calling the shots. And that's what causes us to perceive threat and danger when there's little or none. Now here's the fun one. I like to think about another way to think about the brain as our minion brains. So our upstairs brain is what allows us to be relationally engaged with people, to be able to have thought, and to perceive safety. And so I'm going to play this little clip, and then usually in the group we discuss it. So here's a scene from Despicable Me 2. You'll see, what do we notice about this environment? The minions are happy, they're relaxed, they're perceiving no danger, and let's see what happens. Still, my world is changing. It's okay. So notice now, they're not obsessing, they're not noticing their environment, they're noticing their relational connections. They're taking care of their physical needs, they're eating. So as much as humorous that is, I think it's a good example, and it's also really helpful for working with children to help them understand that there's nothing wrong with them when they experience their purple minion. And so their purple minion is really a force that's come from the downstairs that's now taking charge of their actions and their thoughts. So we'll go back into the minions in a few minutes. So here's a different little picture of our sympathetic nervous system. And this is the most technical slide I have on it, which is still not very technical. So what happens is we have this important part of our brain, this amygdala that senses threat. And then that leads to our hypothalamus that releases adrenaline. Next, that releases cortisol from our adrenal cortex. And now we have our bodily effects of what happens both in our purple minion brain, both in our downstairs brain. We have dilated pupils, we have relaxed heartbeat, rapid breathing, dry mouth, tense muscles, sweaty palms, and our digestion slows. All of these are cues to us that we are sympathetically dominant. And we're going to show you, though, how to change that within a few seconds. My last way I like to think about our nervous system is a way of a smoke alarm. One way I taught my kids about my own trauma responses is that smoke alarms are very, very helpful. But my smoke alarm in my kitchen doesn't know the difference when I am burning a piece of toast, or when my house is on fire, or when I am using my cast iron skillet and I am searing a steak or a salmon fillet to absolute perfection. It's going to go off anytime it senses smoke. And that's kind of like how our downstairs brain works, is that it detects threat outside of reality. And so that's why we need our parasympathetic system to give our downstairs brain or our sympathetic nervous system the information to let us know, hey, actually, I know you see this smoke right here. I know you sense it, but I want to let you know that you're safe. That's for comic relief. My husband put it in there. Thank you very much. The last bit we're going to talk about for a second is this neat thing called the YatesDodson curve. And this shows the optimal performance in a human being. And it shows that we need some stress in order to function optimally. What self-regulation actually essentially is finding ourselves when we have just moved to the right side of the YatesDodson curve, and within a few seconds, moving ourselves back to the left side. And the key thing about self-regulation is we want to learn to catch ourselves early before we hit this point right here past fatigue. Once we hit about here, then we start crashing. We're going to need more intensive relaxation responses where we can step away and recoup and recover a little bit. But until we hit this precipitous drop down, that's when self-regulation is our best ally, because we can return over and over and over hundreds of times during the day to our comfort zone that gives us optimal performance. I like to say that self-regulation is the antidote to our purple minion brain. So here we're going to watch the antidote that gets these purple minions back to their yellow minion brain. So there's a little bit here, and as we see, they're going to enter. Are any of the purple minions, are their relational systems engaged? Are they truly enemies of these guys for the moment, Kevin and whomever else it is? But notice, they don't have access to anything they know, right? Notice their faces. If they have a social engagement system, it is offline. Whereas the ones who are only painted purple, they still have humor, they have desire to connect. And I've always thought in this scene that these true purple minions, they look more like, they look kind of like a giant amount of violent ants coming to chomp. And you'll see, so now they're violent. They have one goal, which is to protect, not knowing that this is actually their master. I'm going to skip ahead a few scenes. We're going to go to the antidote. The antidote's starting to come. Here we go. There. And they're back to their normal selves, as normal as a minion is. So I take the time to go into that depth because, at least for me and for working in this with children, that we're very visual. And it helps me to know that there's nothing wrong with having this system, but there is a way to not be dominated by it. So now we're going to go into our self-regulation skills. Self-regulation is moving into things that scare us with low energy. So when we teach self-regulation, we like to move from the simplest technique into the most complex. So this first technique we like to teach is what has become to be known over years as the wet noodle. So the wet noodle is not necessarily a flop. It's not a flop, but it is knowing and learning that our tension is in our bodies and we can learn how to relax it. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to demonstrate it, and then I'm going to invite you, even watching at your screens at home, to do it with me. So when I do the wet noodle, I start at the tip of my head, and for about a count of 5, eyes open or eyes closed, I'm going to go down through my body and just visualize and sense all of my muscles gaining into complete softness, trusting that my skeletal system can keep me here in this chair, but I don't need tight muscles. And then I'll spend about another couple seconds going back up, noticing what muscles are tight, seeing if I can get them to soften, inviting maybe a little bit of oxygen into that space. And there we go. That's a wet noodle. So at home, I would invite you to find a comfortable seat, and either with your eyes open or eyes closed, I'm going to count down to 5, and then I'll count back up. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm wondering how many of you watching this have been able to find some measure of comfort in your body. Usually in a group, it's about 70% are able to find an initial bit of comfort. I have a neat story about the wet noodle. Is a couple months ago, I was driving down the freeway in my hometown, and there suddenly became, the car in front of me stopped, just dead on stopped. And so I put on my brakes as fast as I could. And after long time of practicing this, my body went instantly into a wet noodle. And I saw that as really neat success. And also the reality is, if I had been hit from behind, that my body would have been less physically damaged. So that's a great example for how not having a threat response, I had my upstairs brain, my downstairs brain told my upstairs brain, act. And then I was able to return to comfort, which gave me self-safety. The second tool that we like to teach is diaphragmatic breathing. What diaphragmatic breathing does is it opens up our airways deeper. So if you think about what happens when we're stressed, is breathing gets shallow and it often increases in space. When we clasp our hands behind our back and open, what we do is we expand our diaphragm and kind of force ourselves to take deep belly breaths. This is one that is very inviting to do when you're in a group of others, because it's a socially acceptable posture, but it also invites other people to do the same. So if you're at home, I invite you to put your hands, clasp your hands maybe behind your head, and take some breaths. Diaphragmatic breathing is kind of a combination technique, because breathing in general takes about 30 to 40 seconds to be able to return to the left-hand side, to the YatesDodson, if that's all you got. And so if you're already regulated and you're noticing a need for deeper regulation, or you're just barely on the edge of dysregulation, then diaphragmatic breathing can be a great intervention. If you're perceiving a lot of threat, it's a good thing that you can do in tandem with the other skills. The next thing that we like to teach is called the peripheral drift. And this is a technique that was stolen from the Special Forces. And Special Forces agents or operatives are taught then that when they're about to take a mark, when they're about to take a target shot, that the way to eliminate any sort of micro movement is to do this exercise. When I'm teaching, I ask people to think, what do you think about? Like, what's one of the first phrases that comes into your mind when you hear fight or flight? And it's tunnel vision. So tunnel vision is one of our symptoms of having sympathetic dominance, or that our downstairs brain is taken over. And so when we teach or really force our vision outwards towards our peripheries, it actually forces ourself back into a calm state. And a lot of males like this because it is the only one, say it's like, ooh, special forces do this, but it's also it's the only one that through brute force we can experience success through. So how this works is, first I'll demonstrate, and then again I'll invite you to do it with me, is that I find a spot on the wall in front of me, and in this case we have the slide, but you can also use objects in your environment. And sometimes when I'm teaching this, I like to have people use their fingers so that they can get a really clear idea of how far their peripheral vision can expand. So when my fingers are about right here, I see each of them in my peripheries, but I'm not losing them, but I can still see them. And so it's about that. I don't know why I do it that speed. It just feels good for me. But when I'm out here now, then I'm noticing, I actually feel it right as I'm saying it. I feel this sense of calm washing over my body. When I've done this in trainings, one of the things I hear back the most from people is that it is very effective for stopping racing thoughts, especially if people have anxiety disorders. So I'm going to invite you to do that with me. So you can either stick your fingers out in front of you as you find a spot on the wall, or focus on this slide, and allow your vision, your eyes to become a little bit relaxed as you're going through this. And so as your fingers go out, kind of follow them. And I like to do that to about a count of 5. 4, 3, 2, 1. So as you were doing that, what were you thinking about? I hope for some of you, you found yourself thinking about nothing. And others of you will, we find these are tools, and these are a toolbox. And so you're going to find as you go out into your daily lives, as you practice different of these tools, which ones become your favorite. This is my favorite for interacting with my teenagers or even my husband when we have a bit of an elevated conversation, because you can stay 100% engaged and connected with the person in front of you. And for a couple seconds, expand your vision to your peripheries, and nobody's going to know that you're not staring eye to eye with them. So it's a great way to stay relationally engaged with someone who is elevated without getting pulled into their distress. For our next activity, I have an illustration from Wreckit Ralph, because I figured if Wreckit Ralph knows this is important, then maybe the rest of us can follow his example.
Show off. Man, oh man, that place was scary.
I know, it was so exciting!
No, exciting is when you smile. Scary is when you clench your butt. And my butt is still clenched.
Oh, come on!
So scary is when my butt is clenched, and my butt is still clenched. That's what Wreckit Ralph says. And so that's a very light note. The last and most technical skill we're going to go over is the relaxation of the pelvic floor. But this next skill that we're going to teach is the most complex, the most technical, and for a lot of people the most uncomfortable to talk about. But it's the only skill that once you master it, it triggers a systemic response of regulation, safety, relaxation. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to put your hands palm out, and then go ahead and put them under the butt, your butt. These are your sits bones. So touch these 2 bones, and then the next thing that you're going to do, or ask you to do, is touch your 2 bones up here, which are your hip bones, or in more medical terms, your ischial tuberosities. So we got these 4 points in our pelvic floor that are really more of a diagonal square. So touch those, and hopefully what you've done through touching those 4 points is that you've just created a touch memory for those 4 points. So if you close your eyes and you imagine what those 4 points feel like, and you can't feel like, go ahead and pause this, touch them again so that you have a really solid sense of where these are in your body. So we're going to imagine that now this is creating a plane inside your pelvic floor. So what I'm going to invite you to do at first is just imagine that space, and imagine that this square is expanding in all 4 sides so that there's no clenching. So I'm going to count to 5, and I'm going to let that expand. So for some people, that is helpful, just that description alone of allowing that to expand. And now what I want to do is just go for about 10 seconds, and we're first going to practice clenching and then maybe unclenching that space. So the relaxation of the pelvic floor is, the reason it works is because in the body we have this vagus nerve, not Las Vegas, but the VAGAS. And that goes all the way from the tip of our spine all the way down to the bottom of our coccyx. And it ends up that when we are able to release the pressure on that vagus nerve, that's when it activates the ventral vagal response, which is this response that tells the body, I'm safe, I'm comfortable, there's no danger. And so another way to think of it, if you have tried softening around it so far and are still a little bit unsure of that sensation, the next thing to do is that we invite people to imagine what they would feel if they were urinating and wanting to stop the flow of the urination midstream, and otherwise known for most females as Kegel exercises. And so practicing that sensation of, oh, I'm using the bathroom and I'm urinating, and then I learned I'm stopping it midstream, and then I'm allowing it to go again, creating that sense of that body awareness of what that feels like is very, very helpful for some people to begin getting comfort with this area. Another great way that I discovered just recently, which is a bit humorous, is I was talking to my teenagers, and I said to one of them, I said, wow, you kind of seem calm right now. And she said, well, I've been relaxing my pelvic floor. I mean, you talk about it all the time. And the other teenager says, oh, do you mean the no-no square? And if you are a young person or you know young people, then the no-no square is been one of the hottest songs of 2020. And so you can either think about softening your perineum, or you can think about softening your no-no square, which is a lot more memorable to me. So I'd like to share a couple illustrations of how I use this. One is I've just learned to do it over and over. When I first started doing it, I actually got a counter, like one that you would use at a fair to see how many people came through your gates. And I would count how many, because what we've come to know is that when you can do any of these self-regulation techniques, upwards of triple digits, so upwards of 100 to 200 times a day, that's when you can gain parasympathetic dominance, which is what we're after. If that sounds like a lot to ask, that's about 5 to 7 minutes total. I like to do this. I'm a martial artist. I've trained for about 8 years in martial arts, first starting with Taekwondo, where I got a second-degree black belt, and I've trained in Krav Maga, and I also now train in Muay Thai. And so when I'm there and I'm training, then I will be doing all of them. And so as I'm with a partner, and Muay Thai is a very intense, aggressive martial art. And so if I'm holding a kick shield for my partner, I will be standing, and every time I receive the kick or the punch on the shield, I will both soften I'll do a wet noodle and soften relax my pelvic floor, and do that over and over. If I am sparring, then I will, you train boxers that we look at the shoulders. Well, they might not know, but that's my peripheral vision right there. And so I'm engaging in all of these as together. And so that's one of the things you can look forward to as you start practicing these, is learning how to bring them together to get yourself into a deeper, safer, faster, sooner. So in conclusion, we like to ask, who is squeezing the muscles in your body? And I don't know about you, but the only one who's been squeezing my muscles is me. So we invite you to stop doing that. And if you have deeper questions that weren't asked here, you can always watch the longer version of Tools for Hope that Dr. Gentry does, or reach out to us. Thanks for watching.